The moment you clicked on this video, your soul recognized something it has been searching for. That persistent feeling of being an outsider in your own life, of watching the world through glass while everyone else seems perfectly content with surface-level existence. This isn't depression, anxiety, or social awkwardness. Rudolf Steiner discovered that when you don't feel at home in this world, you are actually experiencing the most profound spiritual awakening possible. Your consciousness is remembering its true cosmic origin. You walk through grocery stores, sit in meetings, scroll through social media, and feel like you're observing an elaborate theater performance where everyone has forgotten their acting. The conversations feel scripted, the pursuits feel hollow. The entire structure of modern life feels like a carefully constructed illusion that everyone has agreed to pretend is real. Steiner would tell you that this alienation is not a problem to be solved. It's a spiritual gift to be understood. Your soul is rejecting the purely material interpretation of existence because it remembers something infinitely more vast and meaningful. This displacement you feel is what Steiner called the awakening of supersensible perception. When you don't feel at home in this world, you're not broken or antisocial. You're spiritually maturing beyond the limitations of purely sensory experience. Your consciousness is beginning to perceive the invisible forces, the spiritual realities, the cosmic purposes that operate behind the veil of material appearances. The world feels foreign because you're starting to see it as it truly is, a temporary classroom for soul development, not the final destination your spirit was designed for. Consider the great spiritual figures throughout history who embodied this same displacement. Jesus spoke of his kingdom not being of this world. Buddha left his palace because worldly comfort felt like a beautiful prison. Rumi wrote poetry about being a stranger in a strange land, yearning for his true home in divine consciousness. These weren't individuals suffering from existential crisis. They were souls who had awakened to the reality that earthly existence, while necessary for spiritual growth, is not meant to satisfy the deepest longings of human consciousness. Steiner discovered that this feeling of not belonging is actually your soul's compass pointing toward spiritual evolution. When you feel disconnected from the material world's values, when success feels empty and pleasure feels temporary, when you find yourself asking, "What's the point of all this?" you are experiencing what he called the soul's natural gravitation toward its spiritual home. This discomfort is not something to medicate away or therapy away or positive think away. It's something to follow, like a golden thread leading you back to your true nature. The reason you don't feel at home in this world is because you are remembering at the deepest level of your being that you are a spiritual entity temporarily incarnated in physical form for the purpose of conscious evolution. Your soul knows it belongs to something infinitely larger than the narrow confines of material existence, and it's calling you to remember this truth. Steiner taught that this recognition is the first step toward developing what he called spiritual sight, the ability to perceive the invisible realities that give meaning and purpose to earthly life. Right now, as you hear these words, your consciousness is being invited to stop fighting this displacement and start honoring it as the spiritual awakening it truly represents. You don't feel at home in this world because you're ready to discover your real home in cosmic consciousness. Steiner's spiritual science reveals exactly why you don't feel at home in this world, and the answer will fundamentally shift how you understand your entire existence. According to his profound insights into human consciousness, you are currently living through what he called the consciousness soul epoch, a period in human evolution where the soul naturally begins to separate itself from purely material identification and seeks its true spiritual identity. When you feel like a stranger in your own life, you are experiencing the soul's rebellion against the illusion that physical reality is all there is. Your displacement isn't a personal problem. It's a cosmic evolutionary process. Steiner discovered that human consciousness develops through distinct stages, and the feeling of not belonging to this world signals that your awareness is transitioning from what he called intellectual soul consciousness, which finds satisfaction in material achievements and social validation, to consciousness soul awareness, which recognizes the spiritual forces operating behind all earthly phenomena. You feel homeless in this world because your consciousness is literally outgrowing the limitations of purely sensory-based existence. This is why traditional solutions don't work for you anymore. Career success feels empty because your soul knows that earthly accomplishments are temporary shadows of eternal spiritual realities. Relationships feel superficial because you're seeking soul-to-soul connection in a world obsessed with personality-level interactions. Entertainment feels numbing because your consciousness is hungry for experiences that feed your spiritual nature, not just your sensory appetites. Steiner would explain that you don't feel at home in this world because you're awakening to your true home in what he called the spiritual world, the realm of pure consciousness, divine purpose, and cosmic love that exists parallel to and interpenetrating physical reality. The key insight Steiner offers is this: your alienation from the material world is actually your soul's natural preparation for developing supersensible perception. When you stop trying to force yourself to feel satisfied with purely earthly experiences, you create space for spiritual sight to emerge. This is why meditation feels more real than small talk, why nature speaks to you more clearly than human institutions, why silence feels more nourishing than noise. Your consciousness is learning to perceive the invisible spiritual forces that animate all of physical existence. Think about how Vincent van Gogh painted swirling energy fields around stars and trees. He wasn't painting what his physical eyes saw, but what his awakening spiritual perception revealed about the living forces behind material appearances. Consider how Nikola Tesla received his revolutionary inventions through what he called flashes of cosmic consciousness, moments when his awareness transcended purely material thinking and connected with universal intelligence. These individuals didn't feel at home in the conventional world because they were accessing realities that most people couldn't perceive. Steiner taught that when you don't feel at home in this world, you're being called to develop what he termed imaginative cognition, the ability to perceive the spiritual intentions and cosmic purposes that give meaning to earthly existence. Your displacement is actually your soul's invitation to stop seeking satisfaction in the temporary and start discovering your connection to the eternal. This isn't about escaping the world, but about seeing through its material surface to the spiritual realities that make earthly life a sacred opportunity for conscious evolution. If this resonates with the displacement you've been feeling, subscribe to this channel because we're going deep into Steiner's teachings about developing spiritual sight and finding your true home in cosmic consciousness. And tell me in the comments, how is this feeling of not belonging manifesting in your spiritual life right now? What aspects of the material world feel most foreign to your awakening soul? Now that you understand why you don't feel at home in this world, Steiner provides the exact pathway for transforming this displacement into spiritual awakening. The process begins with what he called conscious observation. Instead of fighting your sense of alienation, you learn to observe it as evidence of your soul's spiritual maturity. When you feel disconnected from worldly pursuits, instead of forcing enthusiasm you don't feel, you pause and ask, what is my soul trying to show me about my true nature through this discomfort? Steiner discovered that the feeling of not belonging is actually your consciousness preparing to perceive what he termed the etheric world, the realm of life forces and spiritual intentions that animate all physical phenomena. You begin developing this perception by practicing what he called living thinking. Instead of thinking about the world as dead matter organized by random forces, you start thinking with the world as a living expression of cosmic intelligence. When you look at a tree, instead of seeing cellulose and chlorophyll, you begin perceiving the invisible life force that shapes matter into meaningful forms. When you observe human behavior, instead of seeing psychological patterns, you start recognizing the spiritual intentions and karmic purposes that guide soul development. This shift in perception is why you don't feel at home in this world. Your consciousness is learning to see beyond the material surface to the spiritual realities that most people remain unconscious of. Steiner taught specific exercises for developing the supersensible sight. You begin by choosing one object each day and observing it with complete presence for 10 minutes, not analyzing or categorizing, but allowing your consciousness to merge with its essential nature. You practice what he called pure thinking, thinking that isn't driven by personal desires or fears, but by genuine curiosity about spiritual truth. As your perception develops, you start recognizing that your displacement from the material world is actually your soul's preparation for conscious participation in spiritual evolution. Steiner revealed that every human being is here to contribute something unique to the cosmic development of consciousness, and the feeling of not belonging is often your soul's way of saying you have a specific spiritual mission that can't be fulfilled through conventional worldly success. Your alienation becomes a compass pointing toward your authentic spiritual purpose. Consider how Rudolf Steiner himself embodied this transformation. He felt profoundly displaced from the materialistic worldview of his time, but instead of trying to fit in, he followed his displacement toward developing spiritual sight. This led him to perceive the invisible realities behind human development, education, agriculture, medicine, and art. Insights that have transformed thousands of lives and continue influencing spiritual seekers worldwide. His feeling of not being at home in the conventional world became the foundation for creating entirely new approaches to human consciousness and spiritual development. The practical application is this: when you feel like a stranger in your own life, you practice what Steiner called reverse meditation. Instead of trying to escape uncomfortable feelings through distraction or positive thinking, you consciously enter the discomfort and ask it to reveal its spiritual message. You discover that your alienation from superficial conversations is actually your soul's hunger for authentic spiritual communication. Your boredom with entertainment is your consciousness seeking experiences that nourish your eternal nature. Your restlessness with routine is your spirit, calling you toward conscious participation in cosmic evolution. Steiner taught that the ultimate goal isn't to feel comfortable in the material world, but to transform your displacement into spiritual sight that allows you to perceive the sacred purposes hidden within earthly existence. You don't feel at home in this world because you're being prepared to become a conscious bridge between the spiritual and material realms. The ultimate revelation Steiner offers about not feeling at home in this world is this: your displacement is not a problem to be solved, but a spiritual gift to be fully embraced and consciously developed. When you stop trying to force yourself to feel satisfied with purely material existence and instead honor your soul's deeper knowing, you discover what he called spiritual freedom, the ability to participate consciously in both earthly and supersensible realities without being limited by either. You don't feel at home in this world because you're being prepared to become what Steiner termed a free spirit, a consciousness that can navigate between dimensions of existence with complete awareness and purposeful intention. Consider how Maria Montessori revolutionized education by honoring children's spiritual nature within practical learning environments. Think about how Ida Wegman developed anthroposophical medicine by integrating spiritual insight with physical healing. Reflect on how the thousands of Waldorf schools worldwide demonstrate that you can create educational environments that nourish both intellectual development and soul growth. These individuals didn't feel at home in the conventional approaches to human development, So they created new possibilities that honored both spiritual truth and earthly needs. Your feeling of not belonging is actually your soul's preparation for becoming a conscious creator of spiritual culture within material civilization. Steiner discovered that when enough individuals develop supersensible perception and express spiritual intentions through earthly activities, human society naturally evolves toward what he called threefold social order: economic, political, and cultural systems that serve spiritual development rather than merely material accumulation. You don't feel at home in this world because you're being called to help create a world where spiritual consciousness and material responsibility work together harmoniously. The final integration is recognizing that your displacement is a form of spiritual service. By refusing to pretend satisfaction with purely material existence, you maintain space for spiritual truth to enter earthly life. By honoring your soul's deeper knowing, you become a living reminder that human beings are spiritual entities temporarily incarnated for conscious evolution. By following your displacement toward spiritual development, you demonstrate that it's possible to live with one foot in the material world and one foot in the spiritual world, serving both dimensions with complete presence and authentic purpose. This channel exists to support your journey from feeling homeless in the world to becoming a conscious bridge between spiritual and material realities. Share in the comments how you will begin applying Steiner's insights about transforming displacement into spiritual awakening. Your soul's refusal to feel at home in purely material existence is actually its way of calling you home to your true nature as a free spirit serving cosmic evolution through earthly life.